So we're walking on Sydney oysters then?
Yeah, Sydney oysters, Sydney rock oysters. They're not specifically Sydney. That's just the name of it, Sydney rock oyster. They have a scientific name. Let's see if I can remember. Sacastria commercialis, I think it is.
So that's implicitly a commercial oyster in the name.
Yeah.
Look at these.
That's weenie guy there. These shells look like they've been. These are from openers. The openers that open the oysters. See the tops.
Now, this show, Shifting Sands, grew out of a show we did here in 2008, Lines in the Sand, Botany Bay Stories from 1770 and 1788, which grew out of an MA I was doing, and really we looked at the foundational narratives of this site of Botany Bay, and it was made up of colonial prints and contemporary artworks by Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists. And Michael and I always planned to do a second one. What has happened to Botany Bay in the meantime?
Yes, well, we had a wonderful time doing this.
We did.
Yes, and it was definitely true that we had started this. It was such a coincidence. But, well, what shall we talk about? Shall we talk about...
30 years on.
30 years, yes.
What did you see?
So it's a fascinating comparison, and it's also... We found that things were very the same, only more so, but also it had to be in colour because of the sort of visual sort of intensity. There were many things that were, well, there's the same pollution, there's the same risk of danger, there's the same intensity of new things being developed where it shouldn't be happening, where it's so close to residential things rather than a separate thing, but at the same time this wonderful life and sense of way people are using the place regardless. And when it was early on, it was more the sort of grim side with just people just using it regardless in a certain kind of way. And here it's more more complex about the whole situation, we hope. What would you say, Love?
What we found was it's Botany Bay is a meeting place, and it's really a unique place where it's like all the opposites you can ever think of, they are there, and it's like, it's such a big place, and it can embrace it all in a funny way. It can embrace everything, and it's all sort of there, and perhaps more than it was then. It's now sort of there. The port is enormous. It's the world's largest in Australia, I'm sure, and everything is just big. The airport is the biggest in Australia, and there's enormous wildlife as well. Sort of everything is there. It's a meeting place. It's sort of everything meets there in a funny way, and in a way it reflects sort of life in general, where in our society we have all these things happening as well.
Yes. Yeah. That then it was more the social. I suppose it's now interested in what it says about the whole of life in a certain way, but we really wanted to work on the specifics of the place, very much going around the bay as it was then and covering those forces. But it's, I suppose we used different things. Like there, the hand colouring was just to show the botany thing as opposed to the black and white grittiness. And here the grittiness comes through both paintings that are photographs of paintings, plus some hand colouring. There's a little bit of glitter in here and hand colouring here, plus bringing together, like in this one here, the tugboat, which was one of our first ones. the photograph plus another photograph underneath reversed, plus then something from a drawing. So we've used the possibilities of the digital thing to bring together that sort of variety, and then put engraved glass as well into it. So there are more forces at work in the technical side as well as in the rest of it. But I guess it's sort of like, to go on from what you were saying and from Maria Nugent's book and the meeting place, etc. It's like, it's not just Indigenous and non-Indigenous meeting place. It is all of those things, the industrial, the other. But it's also, out of reading that, there was this notion of deep time that she talked about, not quite as deep time, but in relation to the dreaming and the fact that the mangroves still, you know, like there is something so beautiful in the mangroves and that still survives.
I think the nice thing about the residency program, so all of the artists except for Fiona, who will also talk about her work, completed a residency at the cottage here at Hazelhurst. And the nice thing was actually seeing how a lot of the themes that the artists picked up on came together in everybody's work. So Micky and Steenus talking about the mangroves and being a place of really special, and this idea of deep time is something that also came out in Julie's work. And she really was quite appalled at the way that the landscape had been allowed to be infested with rubbish. She was really taken by all of the rubbish along the beaches, and that was a starting point, I guess, for the video piece, which beautifully timed. We now see Julie actually walking the beaches and collecting rubbish, and this rubbish actually features in these bins that she collected, which were also cast-offs, which she found in a local engineering firm, and she went and approached the proprietor of that firm, and they very kindly allowed her to take these bins, buckets for her exhibition. So that idea of the rubbish is a really nice theme that's come through, the polluted landscape that's come through in all of the artists' works.
And the irony of an Aboriginal artist picking up the spoils or
yes.
of colonisation. No, she was alarmed. First of all, she didn't like, she was surprised that Cook's head was on the waste paper bins. Then after wandering around Botany Bay for a couple of days, she thought it was entirely appropriate. She'd never seen so much litter and plastic, and was in fact very depressed by it.
Okay, yes, I'd like to start, as Tim did, by acknowledging the custodians of this country for the same reasons, and essentially for deeply, profoundly important reasons for my work, because my work's actually about the conversation or lack of it since the meeting at the foundational site of Botany Bay. I've created a work that was about the coastline and using a fabric to mark out the coast from Botany Bay around to Port Jackson, which is the pathway that Arthur Phillip took when he transported from Botany Bay after discovering he didn't want to stay there into Port Jackson. The work, as I say, is about the conversation, so it's also about the misunderstandings and the missed opportunities. And the process that I went through to develop the work was essentially one based on research and conversations with historians, local people, local Indigenous people, and through local council libraries and historical collections. So it's actually come out of a kind of a collection of the detritus that's been left behind in the last 200 years of history. So material that's actually come, that people might remember, symbols that have appeared on our part of, I suppose it's our cultural heritage. The Etruria, the little ship that appears on the Sydney Cove medallion that was made by Josiah Wedgwood. the first kangaroo based on a drawing by Sydney Parkinson, a woman who I like to think as Barangaroo, representing the Eora people fishing in Sydney Harbour. Shell compass based on compasses designed by Bose Brown, but paying some acknowledgement to the shell makers of La Perouse, the shell workers. An image of Joseph Banks that comes from a cartoon from London at the period of the first explorations. He's got a gouty leg, so it's a cartoon, who's called the botanic macaroni in this image. An image of a man from the Sydney region, and this is a significant shift in the way that Indigenous people were represented at this moment of first meeting. And I like to think it was a man who is standing on his land offering a fish to someone who actually doesn't understand the significance of the meaning of this offer. It's like to give a gift, to give food and sustenance to someone to be rejected. But also the meaning is to offer something as a way of representing that it's your land and that you can take food but you mustn't stay. The Snake Man, George Can of La Perouse. The Ella children meeting the French Consul General on Bastille Day in the 1960s. The whale from La Perouse, the petroglyph from Lapa. An image taken by Kevin Gilbert in 1988 that sort of marks the conclusion of this collection of work as a sort of an indication of the fight that Indigenous people have always had to represent their country. There's a group of work outside in the foyer as well that actually goes into the text that I came across in the process of research, and it's set up as a kind of a conversation.